The chamber erupted in a symphony of consciousness as millions of minds, freed from the collective's homogenizing influence, rediscovered their individual voices. The neural cluster pulsed with patterns that were no longer uniform. Each section displayed its own unique rhythm, its own colors, as the absorbed beings reclaimed their identity. Freedom? The voice came from the cluster itself, but it wasn't the monotonous tone of the collective. This was something new, confused, wondering, afraid, but undeniably individual. Is this freedom? More voices joined the first. I remember my name. Sarah. Sarah Chen. I was a teacher on Kepler Station. Zakthar of the Crystal Gardens. The songs are returning. Maria Santos, mining engineer. Is my daughter safe? The controllers staggered under the psychic backlash as their carefully ordered collective dissolved into chaos. But it wasn't destructive chaos, it was the beautiful, creative disorder of free consciousness asserting itself. The process is reversing, Washington reported, studying her instruments in amazement. The individual neural patterns are separating from the collective matrix. They're becoming themselves again. Amelia looked around the chamber, watching as the controllers struggled to maintain their composure. Without the unified will of the collective to sustain them, they seemed smaller, more vulnerable. More alive. You did this to yourselves, didn't you? She realized. You were the first species to be absorbed into the collective. You created this system to preserve yourselves, but in the process, you lost everything that made you who you were. The lead controller's bioluminescent patterns flickered weakly. Its mental voice, when it came, was barely a whisper compared to its earlier commanding presence. We were dying. Our star was failing, our world growing cold. The collective offered immortality, unity, purpose beyond the limitations of individual existence. But you weren't just preserving yourselves, Viestera said, her large eyes reflecting the chaotic light show around them. You were trying to preserve everything. Every species, every civilization, every unique perspective in the galaxy. Yes. We sought to save all consciousness from the entropy of time, the chaos of individuality, the inefficiency of separate existence. And in doing so, you destroyed the very thing you were trying to save, Amelia said. Consciousness without choice isn't consciousness at all, it's just computation. The neural cluster's activity was increasing, and new voices continued to emerge from its depths. But now something else was happening, the cluster itself was beginning to change shape. Sections were separating, forming independent nodes that pulsed with their own rhythms. The absorbed beings are choosing their own paths, Washington observed. Some are staying connected to share experiences and knowledge, but others are asserting complete independence. We do not understand, another controller said, its voice full of confusion. Without unity, without purpose, how do they avoid chaos? How do they find meaning? They create it, Amelia replied. Each consciousness finds its own meaning, its own purpose. That's what makes them beautiful. Sunthara, who had been struggling against the alien influence in her mind, suddenly straightened. Her eyes had returned to their normal silver hue, and her voice was her own again. The songs are clearer now, she said wonderingly. I can hear my ancestors' voices, but also the voices of countless others. They're all singing their own songs, but somehow they harmonize. The chamber was transforming around them. What had been a single massive neural cluster was becoming something more like a garden, individual nodes of consciousness connected by voluntary networks, each one unique but part of a larger, voluntary community. This is not what we intended, the lead controller said, but its tone was wondering rather than distressed. This is more complex than our projections suggested. That's the point, Torres said. Life isn't supposed to be predictable. If you could project it perfectly, it wouldn't be worth living. One of the separated neural nodes pulsed brightly, and a new voice emerged, one that spoke in the harmonious tones of Siltheri language. Daughter of the Deep Guard, it said, addressing Kelthanen directly. The ancient songs speak truly. The path of harmony does not require uniformity. Another node lit up, this one speaking in standard. Lieutenant Chen, this is Captain Torres of the frigate Endeavour. We were lost during the attack on Kepler Station, but we're still here. Still fighting. And we have information about the swarm's structure that could help your mission. Amelia felt a chill of recognition. Captain Torres had been her mentor at the academy, a brilliant officer who had disappeared during the first beetle attacks. Captain? Is it really you? It's really me, Amelia. Changed, but still me. And I'm not alone, there are others here from across the colony. We've been conscious all along, aware but unable to act. The collective used our knowledge, our experiences, but we never stopped being ourselves. The implications were staggering. If the absorbed beings had retained their consciousness and memories, then they had unprecedented intelligence about the swarm's capabilities and intentions. Sir, what can you tell us about the other ships in the swarm? Each ship is autonomous to some degree, Captain Torres' voice replied. But they all depend on coordination from the Queen ships. There are 7 Queen ships in the current swarm, each controlling a segment of the fleet. If we can free the consciousness networks in all 7 ships, we can break the entire swarm's coordination, Washington finished. But how do we reach the other ships? The answer came from an unexpected source. The controllers, who had been silent during the exchange, suddenly began to glow with new patterns. But these weren't the synchronized displays of the collective, each controller showed unique colors and rhythms. We will help you, the lead controller said, and for the first time, its mental voice carried genuine emotion. We have spent eons believing that consciousness required control, that freedom led only to chaos. But you have shown us something we had forgotten, the beauty of choice. You're willing to help us free the other ships? More than willing. Eager. We wish to see what forms consciousness takes when it is truly free to choose its own path. Kelthanen stepped forward, his massive form somehow conveying both respect and caution. The ancient songs speak of redemption, but also of the difficulty of changing fundamental nature. Can beings who have existed as part of a collective for eons truly embrace individuality? We do not know, the controller admitted. But we wish to learn. And learning requires the courage to risk failure. Amelia looked around at her team, seeing her own amazement reflected in their faces. The mission had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes. Not only had they broken the swarm's coordination, but they had potentially converted their greatest enemies into allies. What about the time factor? She asked. How long before the other ships realize what's happened here? The neural cluster, now a garden of independent but connected nodes, pulsed with coordinated activity as the freed consciousnesses worked together to access the swarm's communication network. We have perhaps 6 hours before the other Queen ships recognize the change in this vessel's behavior, Captain Torres reported. After that, they'll either flee or attack us directly. Then we need to move fast, Amelia decided. Can the controllers help us reach the other ships? We can do more than that, the lead controller replied. We can modify this ship to serve as a transport and communication platform. The freed consciousnesses can coordinate the liberation efforts across the entire swarm. And if some of the other ships resist? Then we will face the choice we should have faced eons ago, whether to respect the freedom of others to choose their own path, even if that path leads to conflict. Washington was already running calculations on her equipment. If we can replicate the resonance effect on even 3 more ships, the swarm's coordination will collapse. The remaining ships will be isolated and vulnerable. The risk is that they'll turn their weapons on the inhabited worlds out of spite, Sunthara pointed out. A dying collective might choose to destroy rather than be defeated. Some will, the controller acknowledged. But not all. And those who choose destruction over freedom will reveal their true nature to any who might have doubted the righteousness of your cause. Amelia considered the options. They could attempt to withdraw now, having accomplished their primary mission of disrupting the Queen ship. But the opportunity to free millions of absorbed consciousnesses and potentially convert the entire swarm from enemy to ally was too valuable to ignore. We continue the mission, she decided. But we do it smart. We target the ships most likely to accept liberation first, build momentum, and hope that success breeds success. Agreed, the controller said. But first, we must prepare this ship for its new role. The transformation will require time and the cooperation of all consciousness nodes. The chamber around them began to shift and change as the liberated minds worked together to redesign their organic prison into something new. Walls flowed like liquid, passages realigned themselves, and new structures grew from the ship's living matrix. "It's beautiful," Viestera whispered, watching the transformation with her large eyes. "They're creating something that's never existed before, a vessel designed by and for free consciousness." "What about our extraction?" Torres asked. "The Shadow's Edge won't be able to rendezvous if we're moving with the swarm." "We don't extract," Amelia said, making the decision as she spoke. "We see this through to the end. Either we free the entire swarm, or we go down trying." "An honorable choice," the controller said. "And one that honors the memory of all who have suffered under the collective's rule." As the ship continued its transformation around them, Amelia felt a strange sense of peace. They had come to destroy an enemy and had instead discovered allies. They had faced the choice between genocide and surrender and had found a third path, redemption. But the hardest part still lay ahead. Converting one ship was a miracle. Converting an entire swarm would require nothing short of a revolution in consciousness itself. The Great Awakening had begun. The transformed Queen ship moved through space like nothing that had existed before, part organism, part machine, part something entirely new. Its hull rippled with bioluminescent patterns that reflected the combined will of millions of freed consciousnesses, each one unique but part of a voluntary collective dedicated to liberation. Amelia stood in what had once been the neural cluster chamber, now transformed into a command center that defied conventional design. Organic interfaces grew from the living walls, responding to thought as much as touch. Around her, human and Siltheri team members worked alongside the controllers, who now called themselves the Awakened, to coordinate the most ambitious rescue mission in galactic history. "Status report on the target ships," she called out, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's adapted acoustics. Captain Torres' consciousness, now inhabiting a specialized communication node, responded immediately. "Queen Ship Designate 2 is maintaining standard formation, approximately 50,000 kilometers to starboard. No indication they've detected the changes in our vessel yet." Washington looked up from her instruments, which had been extensively modified by the ship's living systems to interface directly with organic technology. "The resonance bomb components have been successfully replicated and integrated into the ship's structure. We now have 7 devices capable of generating the liberation frequency." "And the controllers, excuse me, the Awakened, from this ship?" The lead Awakened, who had chosen to be called simply First in honor of being the first of its species to embrace individuality again, pulsed with soft blue light. "We are ready. The prospect of freeing our trapped brethren is overwhelming. We had not realized how much we had lost until we experienced what it meant to choose again." Kelthanen moved gracefully through the organic command center, his massive form now decorated with bioluminescent patterns that marked him as an honorary member of the ship's consciousness network. "The deep songs speak of this moment," he said solemnly. "The turning point where the harvested become the harvesters of freedom." "Poetic, but let's focus on the practical aspects," Torres interjected. "What's our approach to Queen Ship 2? The chamber's walls shimmered, and suddenly they were surrounded by a three-dimensional tactical display showing the positions of all ships in the swarm. Queen Ship 2 was indeed maintaining formation, its bulk roughly equivalent to their own vessel. Around it, smaller ships moved in precise patterns, the mindless dance of the collective. "We approach under the pretense of a status exchange," First suggested. "Queen ships regularly synchronize their consciousness networks. We can use this normal procedure to get close enough to deploy the liberation resonance." "What if they detect the change in our ship's consciousness matrix?" Sunthara asked. She had volunteered to serve as the primary interface between the human team and the ship's systems, her natural ability to harmonize with organic technology making her invaluable. "Unlikely," another Awakened replied, this one designating itself as memory for its role in preserving the history of the collective. "The Queen ships operate on different consciousness frequencies to prevent interference. They will not examine our internal state closely unless they suspect deception. Amelia studied the tactical display, analyzing approach vectors and timing. How long do we have before the other Queen ships become suspicious of our behavior? Current projections suggest 4 to 5 hours, Captain Torres reported. After that, they'll expect us to begin the final assault on Alpha Centauri. When we don't comply with the attack protocols, they'll investigate. Then we make every minute count. Signal Queen Ship 2, request a consciousness synchronization conference. The ship around them seemed to shiver with anticipation as its living systems prepared to transmit the deceptive signal. Through the transparent sections of the hull, Amelia could see Queen Ship 2 responding to their approach, its own bioluminescent patterns shifting to acknowledge the communication. They're accepting the synchronization request, Washington reported. We're cleared to approach to within 1,000 meters. As their ship drew closer to its target, Amelia couldn't help but feel a sense of profound irony. They were using the collective's own procedures against itself, turning the swarm's coordinated nature into a vulnerability. Resonance devices ready, she asked. All 7 generators are prepared, Washington confirmed. We can trigger them simultaneously for maximum effect, or sequentially to track the liberation process. Sequential deployment would be preferable, First suggested. We wish to monitor our brethren's awakening, to ensure the process proceeds safely. Understood. Begin the sequence on my mark. Queen Ship 2 loomed ahead of them, its organic hull pulsing with the steady rhythm of the collective. Amelia could see movement within its transparent sections, the converted beings going about their assigned tasks with mechanical precision. Soon, if all went well, they would be choosing their own paths again. We're within range, Washington announced. All resonance generators show green status. Begin the liberation sequence. The first resonance generator activated, sending its frequency through space toward the target ship. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Queen Ship 2 continued its steady approach, its crew maintaining their routine activities. Then the changes began. It started as a subtle shift in the ship's bioluminescent patterns. The steady, synchronized pulses became irregular, chaotic. Through the transparent sections of the hull, Amelia could see the converted beings stopping their tasks, looking around in confusion as individual consciousness began to reassert itself. Second generator activating, Washington announced. The effect accelerated. Queen Ship 2's hull began to ripple with new patterns, wild, beautiful displays of color and light as millions of minds rediscovered their unique voices. The ship's movement became erratic as its crew struggled to cope with the sudden return of free will. They're fighting it, Torres observed. Some of the controllers are trying to maintain collective cohesion. Third generator online. That was the tipping point. Queen Ship 2 erupted in a cascade of liberation as the resonance frequency overwhelmed the remaining collective bonds. The ship's entire hull became a canvas of individual expression, each section displaying its own unique patterns. They are free, First said, its mental voice filled with wonder. Our brothers and sisters are choosing their own paths again. Fourth generator activating. But now something unexpected was happening. Queen Ship 2's liberation was triggering a sympathetic response in the smaller ships around it. Their crews, suddenly exposed to the chaotic beauty of free consciousness, began to question their own collective conditioning. It's spreading, Washington said in amazement. The liberation frequency is cascading through the local swarm elements. Fifth generator online. The cascade effect accelerated as more ships joined the awakening. Each newly freed consciousness added its voice to the growing chorus of liberation, creating a feedback loop that strengthened the resonance frequency. Sixth generator activating. Queen Ship 2 was now completely transformed, its hull displaying patterns that rivaled the beauty of any Siltheri artwork. More importantly, it was beginning to transmit its own liberation frequencies, adding its power to their efforts. Seventh generator. Alarms suddenly sounded throughout their ship as proximity warnings activated. Through the tactical display, Amelia could see Queen Ship 3 breaking formation and moving toward them at high speed. They've figured out what we're doing, Torres reported grimly. Queen Ship 3 is moving to intercept. How long until it reaches us? 12 minutes at current acceleration. Complete the sequence, Amelia ordered. Activate the 7th generator. The final resonance device came online, and Queen Ship 2's liberation was complete. The massive vessel now pulsed with the same voluntary harmony that characterized their own ship, millions of individual consciousnesses choosing to work together rather than being compelled to do so. Greetings, brothers and sisters, came a new voice over the communication channels. We are awake. We are free. And we are ready to help. Can you generate liberation frequencies? Amelia asked urgently. Already in progress. We are targeting Queen Ship 5. It is the farthest from Queen Ship 3 and most likely to complete conversion before interference. The tactical display updated to show Queen Ship 5 beginning to show the telltale signs of liberation. But Queen Ship 3 was still approaching, and its intentions were clearly hostile. What are its weapons capabilities? Sunthara asked. Significant, Captain Torres replied. Organic weapon systems capable of disrupting ship functions, plus boarding pods filled with converted soldiers. We will not allow our newly freed brothers to be enslaved again, First declared. This ship will defend itself and others seeking liberation. I don't want a war, Amelia said. Is there any way to negotiate with Queen Ship 3? Unlikely. The remaining controllers are now aware that the collective is under attack. They will fight to preserve their version of existence, just as we fight to preserve ours. Then we do what we have to do. The chamber around them reconfigured itself into a war room as the ship's systems prepared for combat. Organic weapon ports opened along the hull, revealing biocannons that could fire concentrated bursts of neural disruption energy. Defensive systems activated, creating electromagnetic fields designed to deflect incoming attacks. Queen Ship 5 has achieved 50% liberation, Washington reported. The cascade effect is accelerating there as well. Good. How many more ships do we need to free to collapse the collective's coordination? 3 more Queen ships should be sufficient, Memory replied. The swarm's command structure requires majority consensus among the Queen ships. With 4 liberated vessels opposing 3 enslaved ones, the collective will lose cohesion. Queen Ship 3, for minutes to intercept, Torres announced. Amelia watched the approaching enemy vessel through the tactical display. Unlike their own ship or Queen Ship 2, this vessel still showed the synchronized patterns of the collective. Its approach was mathematical, predictable, efficient, and utterly without creativity or imagination. Can we use that against them? She wondered aloud. Their predictability? Viesthera asked. How? Free consciousness is chaotic, creative, unpredictable. They're programmed to fight enemies that think like they do, logically, efficiently. They might not know how to respond to truly random tactics. First's patterns shifted to what Amelia had learned was the awakened equivalent of laughter. An interesting theory. Shall we test it? Do it. Show them what free consciousness can accomplish. What happened next defied every conventional principle of space combat. Instead of following predictable engagement patterns, their ship began to move in ways that seemed almost dance-like. It spiraled and twisted through space, its weapons firing in seemingly random patterns that somehow managed to create a defensive screen around Queen Ship 2 and the partially liberated Queen Ship 5. Queen Ship 3's response was confused and ineffective. Its weapons targeted where their ship should have been based on logical projection, but free consciousness didn't follow logical patterns. The collective's forces found themselves firing at empty space while their opponents wove between their attacks like artists painting with motion. It's working, Washington reported in amazement. Their targeting systems can't compensate for truly random movement patterns. Queen Ship 5, liberation at 75%, came the report from the freed vessel. Brothers, we must accelerate the process, Queen Ship 2 transmitted. Queen Ships 4 and 6 are also moving to intercept. We will soon face overwhelming force. Amelia considered their options. They had proven that liberation was possible and that free consciousness could defend itself against the collective. But they were still outnumbered, and time was running out. "Can we trigger a wider cascade?" she asked. "Use the partially liberated ships to free others?" "Possible," First replied. "But dangerous. A cascade involving the entire swarm might be unstable. Some consciousnesses might not survive the transition. And if we don't try? Then the collective will eventually overwhelm us, and all our freed brethren will be enslaved again." It wasn't really a choice at all. They had to take the risk. "Do it," Amelia ordered. "Trigger the full cascade. Let every consciousness in the swarm have the chance to choose." "So be it." Beginning swarm-wide liberation sequence. The ship around them thrummed with power as its systems prepared to transmit the liberation frequency to every vessel in the massive swarm. Through the viewports, Amelia could see the other ships beginning to respond, their synchronized patterns breaking apart as individual consciousness reasserted itself across thousands of vessels. The Great Awakening was spreading beyond anything they had imagined. But with it came chaos, confusion, and the very real possibility that the cure might prove more dangerous than the disease. 6 months after the Great Awakening, Amelia stood once again on the observation deck of New Geneva's command center, but the view that greeted her was unlike anything she could have imagined. The twin suns of Alpha Centauri shone down on a transformed world, one where 3 species now lived and worked together in unprecedented harmony. The former beetle swarm had not disbanded after their liberation. Instead, the freed consciousnesses had chosen to remain together, but as a voluntary collective rather than a compelled one. Their ships, now called the Harmony Fleet, orbited Alpha Centauri alongside human and Siltheri vessels, their organic hulls displaying ever-changing patterns that reflected the creative chaos of free minds working together. "Status report," Amelia called out, though her tone was far more relaxed than it had been during those desperate hours of the liberation mission. "All sectors reporting normal activity," replied Captain Torres, not the consciousness from the swarm, but her old sergeant, now promoted to fill one of the many positions created by the rapidly expanding Colonial Defense Force. "The Harmony Fleet is conducting joint exercises with our forces in Sector 7, and the Siltheri Crystal Gardens in Sector 12 are ahead of schedule on their latest composition." Through the transparent walls, Amelia could see one of the Harmony ships conducting what appeared to be an intricate dance with a human frigate and a Siltheri crystalline vessel. The 3 ships moved in complex patterns around each other, each one contributing its unique capabilities to a joint maneuver that would have been impossible for any single species to accomplish alone. And the Integration Council meeting? Scheduled for this afternoon. First and the other awakened are very interested in the proposal for joint research into consciousness harmonics. Viestera approached from the command center's newly expanded xenobiology section, her large eyes bright with enthusiasm. "The quantum resonance studies are yielding fascinating results," she reported. "We're discovering that consciousness itself has harmonic properties we never suspected. The implications for medicine, education, and even art are extraordinary." "Any problems with the former collective members?" "Fewer than expected," Viestera admitted. "Most have adapted well to individual choice. There have been some difficulties, as beings learn to cope with concepts like loneliness and personal responsibility, but the support networks we've established are proving effective." It hadn't been easy. The liberation of the swarm had been successful beyond their wildest hopes. Fewer than 3% of the freed consciousnesses had chosen to return to collective existence, and most of those had formed small, voluntary groups rather than recreating the vast hive mind. But the sudden introduction of millions of new individuals to Alpha Centauri society had created challenges that were still being worked through. "What about the exploration missions?" Amelia asked. "The first joint expedition to the Harmony species' original homeworld departed yesterday," Captain Torres reported. "Mixed crew of humans, Siltheri, and former collective members. They're hoping to find survivors who escaped the original conversion." That was perhaps the most remarkable development of all. The freed controllers, the awakened, had shared the location of their original world with their new allies. If there were any of their species who had escaped the collective's embrace, they would finally be reunited with their long-lost brothers and sisters. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication, and the main display shifted to show the familiar form of First, now serving as the primary representative of the Harmony fleet. The former controller had adapted remarkably well to individuality, developing quirks and preferences that would have been impossible within the collective. "Greetings, friends," First said, its translated mental voice carrying warmth that still amazed Amelia. "I bring news from the deep space monitoring stations. We have detected signals from the Galactic core, other swarms, but also responses to our liberation broadcasts. Other species fighting the collective? It appears so. The liberation frequency we developed has propagated farther than we anticipated. We are receiving requests for assistance from dozens of worlds currently under attack by unawakened swarms." Amelia felt a familiar thrill of anticipation. The mission that had started as a desperate attempt to save one world had become something much larger, a galactic liberation movement that could free billions of enslaved consciousnesses. "Are we ready for that kind of expansion?" "We will never be ready," First replied. "But readiness is not a prerequisite for doing what is right. The ancient songs of your people speak of courage being action in the face of uncertainty." "Those are actually human sayings, not ancient songs," Amelia pointed out with amusement. "Are they? Interesting. The boundaries between our cultural knowledge are becoming quite fluid." And that, perhaps, was the most encouraging sign of all. The three species weren't just working together, they were learning from each other, sharing knowledge and perspectives in ways that enriched all of them. "Lieutenant Chen," came a voice from behind her. Amelia turned to see Colonel Martinez approaching, but the older woman's expression was one of anticipation rather than concern. "Ma'am? The Council has reached a decision about the Galactic Liberation Initiative. They're authorizing the formation of a joint task force to respond to requests for assistance from other worlds. And command of this task force goes to the person who started this whole magnificent mess," Colonel Martinez said with a smile. "Congratulations, Commander Chen. I hope you're ready for a much bigger command." Amelia looked around at the command center, at the display showing human, Siltheri, and Harmony vessels working together in ways that had been impossible just months before. Through the windows, she could see the spires of New Geneva reaching toward the twin suns, their crystalline surfaces reflecting the light in patterns that seemed to echo the songs of the Siltheri crystal gardens. "I don't know if anyone's ever ready for something like this," she admitted. "But I'm willing to try." Viestera placed a friendly hand on her shoulder. "The ancient songs speak of moments when the cosmos itself calls for heroes to rise. Perhaps this is one of those moments. And perhaps," First added, "the greatest heroism lies not in conquest, but in the courage to offer choice to those who have forgotten they ever had one." As the command center bustled with activity around them, humans, Siltheri, and former collective members working side by side to plan their next mission, Amelia felt a deep sense of satisfaction. They had faced the ultimate choice between destruction and enslavement and had found a third path, redemption through liberation. The swarm that had come to devour their world had instead become their allies in a cause greater than any one species could achieve alone. And somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, other enslaved consciousnesses waited for the gift of choice. The Great Awakening had only just begun. But as Amelia watched a Harmony ship perform an impossible spiral around a Siltheri crystal vessel while a human frigate provided defensive cover, she knew they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Free consciousness, it turned out, was not only worth fighting for, it was worth celebrating. The symphony of three species, each contributing their unique voice to the cosmic chorus, filled the space around Alpha Centauri with harmonies that had never existed before. And in those harmonies, Amelia could hear the promise of an even greater music yet to come, the sound of an entire galaxy learning to sing in harmony while celebrating the beautiful chaos of individual choice. The Crystal Alliance had become something more than any of them had dared to dream, a living proof that diversity and unity were not opposites, but partners in the eternal dance of consciousness itself.